Good morning. I'm Major General Philip Henry Sheridan, and I want to just change the program a bit since General Early is late. And so I wanted to change it up because it doesn't make sense for me to debate myself. And I thought that I would just give a brief introduction to myself and open it up for questions from you folks. So just a brief introduction. I was born in Albany, New York. I grew up in Somerset, Ohio. I attended West Point Academy. It took me 5 years to get through because I was suspended by Colonel Lee for fighting. I was suspended for a year. And when I graduated, finally, I went out to Texas, California, and the Oregon Territory before the War of the Rebellion broke out. I fought initially in the Western Theater before coming over to the Eastern Theater to take command of the Cavalry Corps of the Army of the Potomac under Generals Ulysses S. Grant and George Meade. So I'm going to leave that as my introduction and just begin opening up to questions from you all here. So who has a question that will like, yes sir?
Yeah, when was the Army of the Shenandoah formed, and when did you take command?
The Army of the Shenandoah was formed in about August of 1864, and that's when I took command of it. Actually, it was more than just taking command of the Army of the Shenandoah. I was actually command of the Middle Military District, which was responsible for Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Washington City. There were others who were suggested to take that position, William Franklin being one of them, George Meade being another, but Henry Halleck and Edmund Stanton did not like those choices. They thought that David Hunter would have been a good choice for that. They offered it to David Hunter, but David was actually a much more intelligent man than you might think, because he felt that they were offering him the position with me in charge of the operations in the field. And he thought that was too much bureaucracy, that it would take, for immediate decisions needed to be made, it would take too long. So he declined the position and told Grant and Halleck and Stanton to give it to me, so I was in charge of all of it. Any other questions? Yes, Major.
I'd love to hear about female spy.
I did employ a female spy. Prior to the battle here at Cedar Creek, my army was positioned to the east of Winchester, which is north of here. I was very cautious in attacking Jubal Early's army. That was, he had a division in Winchester, and he had 2 divisions north of Winchester. And I didn't know what his exact strength was. It was very important for me to be cautious because a victory was needed to ensure the chances of Abraham Lincoln getting reelected. If he had lost another battle, perhaps George McClellan would have been elected instead. So it was very important. I wanted to be sure that I knew what his strength was. So one of my corps commanders, George Crook, informed me of a woman who was loyal to the Union that lived in Winchester. She was a Quaker teacher. Her name was Rebecca Wright, and that she might be able to give us information, but we needed to have someone to contact her. So I had my scouts find a Negro slave who had a pass from General Early to sell his produce in the town of Winchester. So we approached this man, his name was Thomas Laws, and asked if he would be willing to take messages to Miss Wright. and he agreed to do that. So what we did was we wrote messages on a piece of paper, folded it in tinfoil that he kept in his mouth, and he took his produce in to Winchester, and he met with Miss Wright, who then presented him with information that an entire division and a battalion of artillery had just left Jubal Early's army. So that gave me enough information to know that what I was up against. So Rebecca Wright was very instrumental, as well as Thomas Laws, in getting that information back to me. Any other questions? Yes?
Were you ever wounded there?
Was I ever wounded during the war? Yes and no. The only true wound that I had was not in this war. It was in the Pacific Northwest when I was nicked in the nose by a bullet fired by one of the Indians. It struck my aide who was standing next to me in the neck and killed him instantly. The only other injury that I had was when I was out west. I was mounting a horse, and the horse got spooked and took off, and I fell backwards and I broke my wrist. They were the only two injuries I sustained my entire career. Another question? Come on, I know you have them out there. Yes, sir.
Third Winchester, what decisions you made there?
So the question is could I talk about 3rd Winchester? Yes. My original plan that I had submitted to General Grant, because General Grant was getting a little antsy with my being cautious, he wanted a meeting with me in Charlestown. And so my plan was, because General Early's Army of the Valley was spread out, I wanted to attack him from the south side of Winchester across the Valley Pike. That way General Early would not have a route to escape up the valley towards this direction. So that was the plan that I gave General Grant. However, General Early, who was in Martinsburg, heard of General Grant meeting with me, and he began to consolidate his divisions into Winchester. So I had to change my plan. My plan was to attack from the east along Berryville Pike and take out Jubal Early's divisions in detail. It didn't quite turn out that way because there was a delay. For those of you who aren't familiar with Berryville Pike, it essentially goes through a canyon. And I had rode out to the front with one of the cavalry divisions and had General Wright handle the infantry that was coming in on that pike. General Wright was commander of the 6th Corps. Unfortunately, General Wright took his baggage wagons and his supply wagons before the 19th Corps, so there was many wagons going back and forth, and it delayed the 19th Corps from coming on the field. So that delay allowed General Early to bring in more of his divisions into the town. So essentially, my plan was to have the 6th Corps and the 19th Corps attack Jubal Early, which they did. Unfortunately, one of the instructions given to the 6th Corps was they were to follow the Berryville Pike. What we didn't know is Berryville Pike veered to the left, and so they followed the pike, and that caused a gap between the 6th Corps and 19th Corps. By this time, Robert Rhodes' division was in Westchester. He saw this gap, and he took advantage of it, causing us to pull back, and we reformed our lines, and the 3rd Division of the 6th Corps under General Russell. He was in reserve, and he came up and met with Robert Rhodes and pushed him back. the 8th Corps, which was under George Crook, was in the reserves, and my original intention for him was to go to the left and go to the south of Winchester to block Jubal Early's any retreat, line of retreat, and but because my right flank was being threatened by John Gordon's division of Jubal Early's army, I sent General Crook on to the right flank. General Crook took advantage of a stream that ran north of Winchester called Red Bud Run. So he sent one division to the south of the run, one division to the north. And doing that, it caused his portion of his division to the north to turn and strike John Gordon's division on his flank. That action, coupled with 2 divisions of cavalry that were coming in from the north, basically pushed the Confederates down and rolled them up, causing them to retreat through Winchester. So that basically was the actions that took place there in Winchester. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Discuss the removal of Averill.
Averill? William Averill was a division commander in cavalry, one of the cavalry divisions. Averill was, how could I say, after the Battle of Fisher's Hill, which was the next battle that took place after Winchester, I instructed my cavalry to follow the retreating Confederates, and he decided not to, and he decided to go into camp. And that just angered me, so I just removed him from his command and placed George Armstrong Custer to command his division after that. Any other questions? Yes?
It seems that you and General Early had a number of encounters in the latter part of the war in the Valley. What is your general opinion of General Early as a formidable foe?
Did everyone hear that question? Basically, it was what's my opinion of General Early as a formidable foe. At this stage of the game, not much. He was defeated at Winchester. He was defeated at Fisher's Hill. His cavalry was defeated at Tom's Brook. So did I think that he was still a threat in the valley? Yes, I still thought he was a threat. However, as an entity, I didn't think his army was decimated at this point. So I didn't think too much of him as a formidable foe at this point. Yes, sir.
What was your relationship between you and Custer?
Custer was like a son to me, even though we weren't that far apart in age. He was I considered him one of my better cavalry generals, cavalry commanders. He was different than the other cavalry commanders. My other favorite was Wesley Merritt. They were very good commanders. They were both aggressive, but Merritt was more cautious or I should say, smarter than Custer. Custer took a lot of risks, and frankly, he was very lucky in his risk taking. They wrote a book about Custer. Who's Sitting Bull? Well, we were talking about the Civil War, so if we have to go in a time machine to go forward, yeah, that was one of the risks that he took, that luck was not on his side, unfortunately. But, however, I have to say, there was an inquiry after Little Bighorn, and I was not part of that, but I did write a letter to the commission praising General Custer, because Custer was with me through this campaign here in the Valley, as well as after the war, and I always thought highly of him. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What's your professional opinion of General Crook?
General Crook was a classmate of mine at West Point, and I considered him a friend. Same as Custer. I thought he was a very good general. Did good work for me. Did good work after the Civil War out west as well. And he happened to be in my wedding party as well, too. So yes, he was a good general and a friend. Any particular question, reason why you asked that?
Well, there seemed to be a little acrimony between them from General Crook's standpoint on who actually won the Valley battles. I mean, I know he was under the command of the Union, but at the same time, though, I think he felt that because of his flanking maneuvers, his tactics, that he actually should be given more credit for the victories there.
Okay, yeah, I have to admit, it was Crook's idea at Fisher's Hill to attack the Confederate left by going onto Little North Mountain and coming down and striking the Confederates on their left. I did not give him credit in my memoirs about that, but I'll just throw the question out to you. If we were not successful here, would George Crook, would it fall on him as the person who failed, or would it fall on me? It would fall on me, right? Right, so why shouldn't I get the credit for the victories? Yeah, reasonable, right? So, yes, Major.
How would you rate leadership and actions of General Horatio Wright here at Cedar Creek when you were wandering around Washington?
General Wright is in the audience here. General Wright was my right-hand man.
He paid me $20 to ask.
General Wright was, when I was called back to Washington City for a meeting with Henry Halleck and Stanton, I placed General Wright in charge of the armies here. So I must have thought highly of General Wright to be placed in the command. I also felt that if it wasn't for the 6th Corps, which General Wright commanded, when Jubal Early routed our army, it was the 6th Corps that was the backbone of reforming a line and getting ready to attack Jubal Early before Jubal Early called his attack off. So yes, I think highly of General Wright. And you know, facts are the facts. I put you in charge of that. I mean, you know, come on. Yeah, sure. Okay. Yes, sir.
Other than Robert E. Lee, who did you admire the most on the Confederate side of the battle? What general?
Who said I admired Lee? Oh, with the exception of Lee. Jeb Stuart? Maybe. I don't know if any of you know this situation, but when I was brought east to take command of the Army of the Cavalry Corps, the Army of the Potomac, General Meade and I did not see eye to eye on use of the cavalry. General Meade was a traditional Army soldier who was used to using cavalry for primarily reconnaissance and guarding the flanks and guarding the wagon trains. And that was not my idea of the use of cavalry. As a matter of fact, when I was brought east, I met with President Lincoln, and President Lincoln, as well as General Grant, were not happy with how the Union was utilizing their cavalry. As a matter of fact, President Lincoln said, "Whoever saw a dead cavalryman." So I wanted the cavalry to be more in line with what Jeb Stuart's cavalry was, more an offensive fighting force as opposed to one that's used for guarding and reconnaissance. And that caused much consternation between me and General Meade, that we actually had a very sharp argument with many expletives thrown out, many of which I cannot use here because we have mixed company. And I told General Meade that if he wanted to command the cavalry, he could. I would not give another order. And I said, if you would only let me, I could whip Jeb Stuart. Now, Jeb Stuart was a very good cavalryman, and one who used his cavalry in a manner that I wanted to use the Union's cavalry. So General Meade got angry with me, and he stormed off and went to General Grant and told General Grant what I said. And General Grant said, "Did he really say that?" And Meade said, "Yes, he did." He said, "Well, then you should go let him do it because he generally knows what he's talking about." And so I got, at that point, pretty much independent command of the cavalry, at which I took 10,000 cavalry with me on a raid to Richmond. Part of the reason for doing that was to draw the Confederate cavalry away from Grant's infantry, which it did. And in the process, Jeb Stuart went with them. In this process, when we were pulling back from the outskirts of Richmond, a trooper from the 5th Michigan under Custer's command saw Jeb Stuart and pulled out his revolver and shot him and mortally wounded him. So my first foray as cavalry commander set out and dispatched Jeb Stuart. So doing that, I felt that Jeb Stuart was probably one that I admired. I admired him even more so when he was dispatched. Yes?
Yeah, when you were fighting in the Western Theater, who was the tougher opponent, Morgan or Forrest?
Neither.
Wheeler?
Neither.
How about Wheeler?
No, I didn't engage with any of those.
Okay.
My first foray, it was I had a cavalry brigade. Actually, 2 were given to me, and my first was against the cavalry commander named Chaffee. So, following that, I fought at Perryville and Stones River, Chickamauga and Chattanooga and Tullahoma. Most of that was against Braxton Bragg. So I was not with Grant. So I was under Rosecrans for most of the Western Theater. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, what did you think about Colonel Grierson and his raid?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
You mentioned when you were put away, had a problem. Was it a disciplinary problem or was that?
The reason for my suspension was disciplinary problem. I do. There was another cadet by the name of William Terrell, a Virginian, but loyal to the Union. And he was accusing me of not dressing in line properly, and I disagreed with him. So I thrust my bayonet at him. And he reported me, and when I heard that he reported me, I met him. Now, mind you, I'm not a tall fellow, and Terrell was much taller than me, and I threw the first punch, so I almost had to jump up to hit him. And we had little fisticuffs, so that's what caused my suspension, was fighting. I did meet Terrell later on at the Battle of Perryville. He was commanding a brigade there, and before the battle we had met and we made up. So Unfortunately, he was killed at that battle. So I'm glad we made up before that. Yes, sir.
Did you have a security team with you at all times?
A security team. I was escorted by the 6th Pennsylvania Cavalry, so that was essentially my security. They escorted me pretty much wherever I went. They escorted me to Washington when I went to that meeting, and they were my escorts in Winchester when they were the ones that informed me that they heard cannon fire down in this area here.
Did you ever meet Lincoln? If so,
Oh, yes.
what was your interaction? What were your feelings about him?
Anybody who thought highly of me, I thought highly of them. So he did think highly of me, and he didn't really know me. As a matter of fact, he described me as a chunky fellow with long arms, short trunk, short legs, hardly any neck to hang me, but if my ankles itched, I could stoop over and scratch them without bending. Did he like me? He must have. So yes, I thought he was a very good man. I didn't have a lot of interactions with him. I only met him when I first came east, and I don't believe I ever met him or talked to him after that.
Did he pardon anybody that you correctly?
Not to my knowledge. If he did, he would have pardoned General Gouverneur Warren, who I dismissed from the 5th Corps after 5 Forks. So if he would have pardoned someone, it would have been most likely him. He didn't, because General Grant and actually General Meade had issues with General Warren anyway, and I had discretionary orders to remove him from command if I saw fit, and I did. Any other? Yes.
What was your greatest accomplishment?
My greatest accomplishment? I have several. I mean, I was a single man. In 1875, I married a woman 22 years younger than me. I think that was a pretty good accomplishment. She gave me 4 children. I think that was another great accomplishment. And but here in the Civil War, I think this battle here at Cedar Creek would have to be one of those, as well as 5 Forks, because my victory at 5 Forks caused the Confederate line to weaken, causing the 6th Corps to break through at Petersburg, which caused the Confederates to begin pulling out of Richmond and Petersburg. And it was my cavalry that stopped Lee's army at Appomattox Station. So I would say there's 3 biggest accomplishments. Which one was the greatest? I don't know. It's hard for me to choose, but I'd say those 3 would probably be the greatest. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What about the horses? You had 10,000 cavalry. How do you replace the logistics?
Well, the Union Army was a little different than the Confederate Army in that respect. The question is how did we replace horses? My initial command had 10,000 horses. The Union Army purchased horses and trained them to be used as cavalry horses, as well as horses pulling artillery. And so we always had a replenishment of horses. The South typically used their own horses and then brought their own horses. If they lost their horse in battle, they typically had to go back home to get another horse. They didn't have that luxury of having horses purchased and trained and vetted for use in the Army. General Hunt, do you have anything you could add to that?
We went through a lot of courses in the artillery. The guns are very heavy. If you go out with the battery, large percentage of the courses, you weren't taking your guns very far.
Yeah. Horses that pulled artillery were often targets. So they weren't immediately replaced, but the men, if they wanted to save the cannon, would have to pull the cannon themselves, drag the cannon, right? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
We're going to be hearing a talk concerning the exploits of Colonel John S. Mosby, and I'd like to know, before that talk, what was your opinion as to where he goes?
He was a pain in my ass. A thorn in my side. He caused a lot of consternation with his raids. One in particular, it wasn't so much a raid, but it was his men that were involved in this. And shortly after Fisher's Hill, 3 of my staff, including an engineer on my staff named John Meigs, were riding, and they encountered several men on horseback in Union clothing, uniforms. And as they passed by, they recognized that these 3 in Union uniforms were not Union soldiers, but rather Confederates, and they were behind actually our lines. And so Lieutenant Meigs pulled out his pistol to fire at one of them, and they fired and killed him. They captured one of the others, and the 3rd man escaped and came back. And when he came back, he said that Lieutenant Meigs was murdered. Now, Lieutenant Meigs was a good friend of mine because his father was Montgomery Meigs, who was the Quartermaster General for the Army of the Potomac. So I got incensed by the fact that he was murdered, and so I gave an order to burn within a 5-mile radius around the town of Dayton, Virginia. Burn all the homes, because generally Mosby's men would do a raid and then return back to their homes. They would blend in with the countryside. And so because of this guerrilla tactics, I felt the only way to get back at them was to burn the homes that they were going back to. Not all the homes were burned, maybe about 30, before my men asked me to rescind my order because they weren't comfortable with burning homes. So I did. I eventually rescinded that order. But Mosby was a thorn in my side. He was also another reason why General Grant wanted me to chase General Early's army east, and there were plans to reconstruct the Orange and Alexandria Railroad from Alexandria. It came down to Manassas Gap. They were going to reconstruct that. He wanted me to guard that operation, and I rejected that because I thought it was too risky. It would take too much infantry away to guard against Mosby's raiding, and so I declined General Grant's wishes in that regard because of one reason was because of Mosby's raids. I can't wait to hear him talk. Yes, ma'am.
What was your main motivation and passion for doing what you do? Is it just your career military man, or do you have very strong personal feelings about?
You mean am I impressionist as Sheridan you're talking about?
Yes.
This was not my only impression. I started out doing a colonel who was in the Army of the Potomac that fought at Gettysburg, as well as many of the battles prior to Gettysburg, as well, and in the wilderness in Spotsylvania. I was doing him for a few years and belonged to a living history group, and they came up to me and said, we need a Sheridan, and you kind of look like him. And so they said, would you be willing to do him? So I researched Sheridan and found that there's a ton of information about him, and I agreed to do it. I've been doing Sheridan for the last 10 years. So it's my passion to learn more and more about not these men that I portray, but also the history of the Civil War itself. And so that's why I do it, because one of the things that living historians do is try to keep history alive. They don't teach it much in schools anymore, and the only way for people to learn about it is either reading the books or listening to people like us. Thanks, that's a good question. Not that any of the other ones were bad, but yes, sir.
After riding horse Re-Enactment, 20 miles, got ready to death, correct? What did you see when you got on the scene of the battle?
So the question is when I rode from Winchester towards Cedar Creek here on my horse, Re-Enactment, what was the scene that I saw? And when I got to Newtown I think is renamed now. It's Stevens City, which is just north of here. That's when I began to see streams of men running in my direction and wagons, ambulances coming in my direction, and that's when I knew that it wasn't, I had thought the cannons that were heard earlier in the morning was a demonstration by one of Crook's divisions, and I knew that as we got closer I could hear the cannons sounds were louder and more constant. We knew it wasn't a demonstration, but when I saw the men and the wagons, I knew that something was wrong. And one officer came up to me and said, General, we're whipped. And I said, you may be whipped, but the Army is not whipped. I said, we're going to be sleeping in our camps tonight. And I had some of the 6th Pennsylvania Cavalry that was my escorts. I had them form a line behind me to keep soldiers from further retreating, and had them return them back and face the other way. And so all along the way I kept seeing were soldiers. They kept cheering me on. I said, don't cheer for me. I said, face the other way. I said, we're going to lick them out of their boots today. I said, turn around and face the other way. So that was sort of the scene. It was a little depressing at first to see such streams, because 2/3 of my army were in retreat at that point. So I have to give accolades to General Wright for assembling his men to plan to re-attack General Early. Only one thing you can say. It's 12 miles, but my horse galloped most of the way. And by the way, his name was Re-Enactment. He was named after a town in Mississippi after my first successful victory at Boonesville, Mississippi, when I was a brigade commander. And that's when the horse was given to me, so I named it Re-Enactment. But after riding here in this victory at Cedar Creek, I renamed him and called him Winchester after that. And by the way, anyone who's interested, you can go to Washington City. He resides in the museum under glass. Stuffed, yes. Yes, sir.
So if you had still been up in Washington with Grant and not got wind of what was going on, there was something going on here, not written down in their chief the tide of the battle, what do you think would have been the outcome in the short and then also the medium long term for the war?
General Wright, you want to answer that question?
We had formed our defensive line for nowhere else when General Sheridan showed up, and we would have won the day. We would have still won the day, but he did inspire the men, and he did bring back men to the line, as he said, and he did turn the men around and told them to fight. He was more of an inspiration to them than I was, because I'm more mild-mannered.
He didn't have.
Well, I don't want to say that. Yeah, he has more of a fighting personality, but we would have won the day, yes.
And you also have to keep in mind, too, that while General Wright was reforming and reorganizing the Union line, General Early decided not to go further. He stopped. So the fact that and one of the reasons that he stopped was because many of his men were pillaging the Union camps, and he didn't have the full force with him to continue on. That was one of the reasons he decided not to. And if General Wright turned that into an offensive attack, he'd be attacking a thin line, a decimated line, because many of his men were behind his line pillaging the camps. Yes?
Could you talk a little bit about your religious beliefs and how they did or did not inform your decisions?
My religious beliefs, I was raised a Catholic, which was not too typical and looked upon. As a kid, I was called a papist, so I was bullied and mocked as a child. They also called me a Mick because I was Irish. My parents came from Ireland, immigrated from Ireland. I wasn't very religious, so not a lot came into play because of that. All I could say is how I was raised, and I was raised a Catholic and got married in a Catholic church in Chicago. But beyond that, I don't think any of my religious beliefs came into play when it came time for battle, because if any option or opportunity I had to destroy the enemy, I was going to destroy the enemy. Not to mention destroying this beautiful valley that you see here today. Part of my orders from General Grant was essentially to destroy all means of support for the Confederate Army, which included any produce, any crops, any livestock. And so between Strasburg, south of here, to Stanton, further south, and between the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Allegheny Mountains, it was destroyed. There were 2,000 barns, 70 mills. We drove 4,000 head of livestock in front of my army, and we destroyed and distributed 3,000 head of sheep, distributed them to my army. So if my Catholic upbringing had anything to come into play, chances are I would have objections to doing something like that, which I did not. I was on the same page as Grant and Sherman. We felt that total warfare was the only way to speed up the end of this war. And bringing the war to the doorsteps of the people supporting it was going to end it a lot quicker. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yellow Tavern being one of your bigger accomplishments, what was maybe your biggest setback?
Chickamauga. At Chickamauga, and I don't take credit for the loss there. It was my men who were starting to be routed at Chickamauga, but that was because the commander of the Army of the Cumberland was William Rosecrans, and our line was formed, and he got word. I don't blame him 100% either, but he got word that one of our divisions was not in the line and there was a gap. Well, that was not accurate. Instead of sending a courier to investigate that to see whether or not that was true, he just told the division that was next to me to move to the north to plug this gap when there was no gap. And when he did that, it created a gap. General Longstreet, who came to reinforce Braxton Bragg, took advantage of that gap, and that's what started rolling up our line. So of the battles that I fought in, that was my only loss. Okay, it's time. My time is up, and I thank you for your questions. I will be in General Wright's headquarters out over here next to General Lee's headquarters. If you have any further questions later on today, please stop by. Thank you.